In this nugget, we talk about driver and device management. We start talking first of all about the driver store packages. I think I remember in our last nugget entitled Device Drivers, we took a look at the file location for that. And remember, that's going to be in Windows System 32 in the driver store, and then there's a file repository for us here. So we will take a look at the driver store packages, how to do things such as populate that with device drivers of your own or that you want to make sure are pre-populated there. We'll also take a look at Device Manager. This is going to be where most administrators and advanced people or help desk folks will be managing devices on most of the machines. Also, we'll take a look at alternative methods for device management. Most of these are really just more end-user friendly than Device Manager, which might baffle a lot of your small office and home office users. Alright, I mentioned the driver store, and I showed you where it was located, in our case, under the Windows directory, also known as system root. Really, system root is just a variable for wherever you installed Windows. Most cases, it's C:\Windows, and then System32, and then the driver store. This is going to contain our default drivers, and there's got to be hundreds of those things there. There's a whole bunch of them. You can also add or update those drivers. Anytime you use something like Windows Update, and it detects that you have a driver that has an update available, then it will go ahead and make that available for you, and you can, of course, choose to install that. Any drivers that are available through Windows Update are always signed, so usually you can depend upon them to be pretty reliable and good drivers. You could also pre-stage. You see, what happens here is when a user, just a generic user that doesn't have any administrative privilege, tries to plug in a new device, and it needs drivers that are not already installed in Windows, then it has to go out and get them. And it can get them from Windows Update, or it will prompt you for a website potentially, or you can download from them from a vendor, or provide media. However, you cannot actually install the driver unless you are an administrator. That presents a problem because if we have a large organization with a lot of users that use a common device that a lot of our departments need, but we don't always have the driver available for it, we can't depend on the users to go get them because they're not administrators, and we don't want to make them administrators, nor do we want to go around and visit each desktop to be able to install the driver for the user. So pre-staging the driver using pnputil.exe is a great way to make sure that the drivers are available and that we can prevent our users from being administrators. Let me go ahead and take a look at how we might demonstrate this. Okay, here I've gone to a website. This is just SIG, and you may be familiar with them. They make a lot of these types of devices. There are these expansion cards that in this case would be adding an external serial ATA 6 gigabit per second 2-port expansion card. So I could plug in external hard drives using eSATA here, which I prefer because it's very, very fast. And the price doesn't look too bad either. So anyway, what I would do is I'd go down here to download, and then I would just download the drivers. Okay, I would click on drivers here, and there's a couple of drivers. Notice that these only say Windows 7 Vista. Since the code base is really the same in large part for Vista and Windows 7 as well as Windows 8, chances are very good that a driver designed for Windows 7 will work just fine. So I just downloaded the most recent version, which I've already obtained. And I've just downloaded that to my hard disk under local C, and then pre-staged drivers directory, and there's the name of the driver file. Now I also have to expand that, don't I? Because the command that I'm about to use doesn't recognize only .zips. So I'm going to just copy all of these, and then I'm going to go back up a level and paste them in. Okay, so paste them in. And then now we've got all of these files as necessary. And what we're really looking for there in particular is the INF file, because that's going to provide all of the instructions for how to make this install. So let's go down to our Windows 7, x86, and there's our INF file. So what I've done here is I've just gone to an administrative command prompt. I've typed in pnputil-a to point it to the file path for this INF file, which is what we can see right here. Okay. Once I've done that, I think I'll just press enter here, and it should just add this in. Notice that it also doesn't keep the same name of the INF file. This INF file here is really the same exact file as this one. It's just that this one has been renamed. It does that because Microsoft wants to guarantee uniqueness in case of two vendors accidentally naming files the same thing. So Microsoft will put their own numbering on here to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now what would happen is if a user were to install that particular PCI Express card for the external serial ATA ports, they could do so without being administrators. The computer would start up, it would detect this INF file but based on the hardware ID, and it would then install the appropriate drivers for that device. Now, let me show you something else here too. If I wanted to delete it, let's say that that was a mistake. We got the wrong driver, I don't know, something like that. Or we found out that this particular driver causes problems with some other hardware we have or causes conflicts. Then we could also remove it. Don't just delete the files though. That's kind of a messy way of doing it. You want to use the pnputil command to delete this as well, to give yourself a clean deletion. You would do a pnputil-d, and then you would just type in the name of the OEM file. You don't have to type the whole path, OEM18.inf. By the way, you can also add into this, I'm not going to use it, but you can also add in here -f, and that would force it. That might be useful if, for some reason, the file's kind of locked open, or you're having trouble gaining access to that particular file to delete it. Once you do that, it, of course, then successfully deletes the file. Also, jumping ahead here, notice that you can also use pnputil-e. This will enumerate all of your OEM numbered INF files, and it will tell you who made them. Because otherwise, if you just look through the list of OEM, then whatever number, and then .inf, it's kind of hard to tell by just looking at that who the vendor is and so forth. So this helps to kind of translate where those driver files came from. Then as we move on down here, let me point out that there's alternate driver locations as well. This can be very handy because you may not want to, for example, drag around shiny media or always go to the manufacturer's website and download the driver. One thing you could do instead is you could use the registry key called device path in the registry, and then I would normally point this to a network share, so it might be whack server, and then share for my drivers. And then, of course, in the drivers in the drivers folder there, I would only put drivers that I was pretty sure I would use on a lot of my computers. Maybe a lot of my users use the same scanner or use the same kinds of devices. Well, I would just pre-populate that with a lot of the common drivers that I would need. Also, Windows Update, again, is another location to get an alternate driver location. This would be useful, for example, if, again, it's not in the pre-staged list of drivers. What will happen is Microsoft will first look on the local hard drive in the pre-staged location in the driver store that we see up here. If it doesn't find it there, then it will look in the device path in the registry here, such as something I might have added in like this. If it doesn't find it there, it will look in Windows Update. And if it doesn't find it in Windows Update, then you'll have to do it manually, either from media or download it from their website, something like this. By the way, if you do decide to change the device path, only one value will fit in there. So instead of using system root INF, which is the default, you can change it to another location, but you have to make sure that if it's something like a UNC path, that it's always available. Let me just show you here. Regedit from an administrative command prompt. And hopefully I can remember where this is. HK local machine, software, Microsoft, Windows. I'm pretty sure it's Windows is next. Windows, and then current version, and then there's our device path here. You can see that it only accepts this one value. But so if you wanted to, you could change it to whack, server 1, drivers, something like that. Okay, so that's just an option for you if you want. Again, might be useful if you want to do that on something like a reference machine that you then image and then send out to all of your other desktop clients, for example, making it an easy way to locate centralized driver stores. Now then, once your devices are all installed and everything's working all right, you've got to work with Device Manager to manage them. In fact, Device Manager might also be used if something's not working right, because it should show you any devices for which the driver is not properly loading. That's normally going to be designated by a little yellow circle with a black exclamation point in it, for example. Anyway, the Device Manager is the primary device UI or interface that we use to manage our devices. I talked to you earlier about how to open that up, and we'll take a look at that here again shortly. But the main functions of this, as we'll quickly go through this list, is that one of the things you can do is to add legacy hardware. Now, these first two items that are on the list are ones that we don't use very often anymore. We used to add legacy hardware a lot more in the old days when, for example, let's say Windows 95 came out, if we needed to add a modem that was not plug and play, well, we would have to add a legacy piece of hardware. That just means an old piece of hardware that's not plug and play. Rarely, if ever, do we have to do that anymore. Also, you can view hidden devices. There are actually hidden devices in the operating system that are detected, even if you have all signed drivers and it's all just kind of an out-of-the-box installation of Windows using very much off-the-shelf hardware. This is because Microsoft themselves has some drivers, or actually many drivers, that are not actually signed even by Microsoft. Just go figure, right? Anyway, but you could view those hidden devices, and the reason why you might want to do that is because some of them might, again, be causing problems or conflicts or some other such issue. The other thing you could do would be to view the device properties, and there's a whole different branch of things you can go off of from there. You can do just about all the rest of the things we're going to look at here. You can use driver management in the device properties. You could update the driver, for example. If you know that there's an update that makes maybe it's more reliable, more stable, or adds an additional function to the device you're trying to use, you can disable the device. If you suspect that maybe it's causing problems, or ever since you installed the device and the driver, the system will no longer fully boot. Well, that could be a problem with a driver. So you could boot into safe mode and then disable that item. You could roll back. Maybe you updated the driver, and now ever since you've done that, the system just doesn't seem to work properly anymore, or it seems to work slowly. Well, you could roll back that driver and go to the old version, and hopefully your problem would go away. You could even uninstall the device. So when we say uninstall, of course, you would have to physically remove the device from the machine. So you'd either have to physically shut off the power, remove an internal device, or just unplug an external device. After you've done that, if you don't ever want to use that driver again and don't ever want to use that device again, you can then uninstall the actual device driver. And that, again, you can use Device Manager for. You can look at very specific details of your devices as well, such as identifying the hardware ID. And this is new with Windows 8. You can view events related to that specific device. This might be very useful if it's causing error messages to come up or something like that, or causing some kind of a conflict. Hopefully you'll see something in the event log that will give you a clue there that that's being your problem device. You can use power management. Some devices, but not all of them, will sleep or go into some kind of a suspend mode or low power state. And you can adjust those power management properties. You can adjust the resources. Again, we don't have to do this one very much anymore either. If you have been in computing for a long time, you remember that years ago we used to install modems back before we had broadband access. And these modems would be what we would use for internet access or bulletin board services. Yeah, that's really going back a ways. Anyway, very often they would use an interrupt request or an I/O or a DMA address, something like that another device was also using. And that would cause a problem because you cannot have two devices using the same resources. So you could adjust those resource allocations from the device manager. A lot of times it didn't work anyway. But anyway, that's what we used to have to do. And then you can, again, configure driver settings. Some of the drivers are very plain. They don't really have any configuration that you can do other than maybe updating, disabling, rolling back, that sort of thing. But they don't have any specific properties in the driver itself. Other ones do, and most commonly, you're going to see that with some modems, printers, or network cards are probably the ones you're going to see that happen with the most. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at Device Manager so that we can see all of this in action. So here I'm just going to go ahead and go to Device Manager to kind of show us some of this stuff. Remember, one of the things we can do is to add legacy hardware, so I could right-click on the name of the computer and choose Add Legacy Hardware, which takes you through really just a pretty simple wizard. You can have it scan for the hardware automatically. May not be able to detect it, especially if it's not good plug-and-play hardware. Or you can select from a list manually, and you would click Next, and you would specify what the specific device was. Okay, so that would be one way of doing it. And then, of course, you would also choose Have Disk if you've got maybe Shiny Media or something like that. And you would then install the drivers from that location. And based on the INF files that it finds, it would be able to identify the hardware that you're trying to install. Sometimes the specific drivers would actually work for maybe several different physical devices, and you would have to pick from the list of the ones that you want to use. Another thing you could do is to choose Show Hidden Devices. Not really sure that we're seeing anything much different here right now, but there may be hidden devices, which would be those devices that have had a driver installed but are not currently attached. Maybe something that's no longer plugged in to the USB port, for example. So that would be another thing that we could do. We can also, what else do we have? View device properties. Okay, that's a good one. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of these. And I don't even know which one I want to look at. I'm just kind of making this part up as I go along. So let's say we went up to Bluetooth, and I wanted to look at the generic Bluetooth adapter. And it keeps opening off screen, so let me drag it over. It just tells you the device is working properly. Otherwise, if it's not, it'll usually say something like there's a resource request problem, or that there is a device problem. The device driver did not properly load. Give you a message like that. Over on advanced, there's really not a whole lot here. We can get a manufacturer ID if you would ever need it. A hardware ID here, address as well. The driver itself, we can see that it's assigned by Microsoft Windows. We already took a look at a lot of these things. Notice that one thing we could do would be to update the driver. If there's a driver update available, we could browse your computer for the driver software if you've downloaded it from the manufacturer, for example. Or you could search automatically if you're aware of the fact that it's up on Microsoft's website for Windows Update. So you could do it that way. Once you've updated it, if it causes a problem, this is where you can just roll it back. Kind of goes back in like a time machine fashion back to the previous driver. You can also disable the device if you don't expect to need it, or you think that it's causing you a problem and maybe conflicting with another device you have. Or you could completely uninstall it, but again, it would just reinstall if it's still attached to the computer when you started up the computer again, or when you ran hardware detection again. Specifically also, if we go into the details, you can see the device description. This is also useful sometimes. You can look at things such as the hardware ID. Now, why would that be useful? Because later on, if you want to get more specific about devices that are restricted so that users cannot see or cannot use, then we could disable those devices through group policy, but we would have to copy this, and then in a policy we would have to paste in that value. And then here's where I was talking about earlier, events. This is something that's newer that I really like, and this will tell you all the various items relating to that device. So, for example, it first installed here tells me what hardware ID or device instance ID it used. All kinds of things there. You can even go to View All Events, which takes you to the actual event log, and it creates a special filter based on this device instance ID. So, if I clicked on that item, then it would open it, and we would see it right here. So, we would get a specific filter for that one device. Let me look at another device. This would be one that would have more detail. Probably your network adapter might have more detail. Let's look at this Intel Pro device, whatever that is. Notice that we have additional tabs here, such as this advanced item, where we can specify things like the flow control, whether we're enabling sending and receiving flow control, or whether we're going to use jumbo packets. Right now it's disabled. If I have network equipment that supports it and destination hosts that support it, I might enable that item and give it a specific value here. But you got to really know what you're doing, of course, with that item. Generally speaking, most of the default values for these types of things are going to be the safest, most compatible value, but you may be able to increase performance by adjusting some of this one way or the other. So anyway, this is where you can adjust some of the specific properties for a given device. What's the other one? Oh, resources. Remember I talked to you earlier about most devices will need some kind of interrupt request, like this, or an I/O range, or a DMA address, memory range, that sort of thing. Well, this is where we would adjust those things if we could. Notice that this is blocked out, though. We cannot deselect use automatic settings. Most devices are that way now. I can't even remember the last time I had to adjust one of these resources. Used to do it all the time back in Windows 95. Haven't done it in years. But if it did give you a problem and this was a conflict, then you could change it. One of the reasons, by the way, why this is true is because of the Advanced Configuration Power Interface, or ACPI. The later versions of this allowed for a greatly expanded list of resources. It used to be that you could only go up to maybe 7 interrupt requests, for example, or if you could even double that to 14 in some instances. But now we can go to 19, or numbers that are way out there. We really just don't run out of resources anymore. Oh, I guess I wasn't done with that. There's also the power management item here. So this is, again, you can allow the computer to turn off this device to save power. Okay. Likewise, you could allow the device to wake up the computer if necessary as well. Kind of useful for certain network cards. So those are the things that we can do. We can adjust things such as those resources, power management, specific details of the device. Now, in addition to Device Manager, which is probably the preferred tool for IT professionals, help desk folks, and advanced users, you do also have alternative device management tools. The first of those would be something we also had in Windows 7, the Devices and Printers folder. Now, this does not show you all devices. That's one of the reasons why it might be less of an advantage for somebody that's a full-time help desk or IT pro. That's because it's really designed, as are all of these things that I'm showing you here, it's really more designed for the home office user or the home user, somebody like that. It's going to show you in the Devices and Printers folder mostly external devices, so something that's connected via Bluetooth or FireWire, or in a PC environment, most likely USB ports, because that's usually what we connect to there. But that would be things such as, an external scanner, for example, should show up there. Also, printers will show up. Very often printers can be attached via a network connection. That's another connection method that could be used, but they should all show up. Also, all your scanners should appear there, as well as something you might not necessarily expect. That would be media extenders. Windows operating systems, by default, will usually allow for sharing media, like any movies, music, videos, that sort of thing, on your Windows computer. And then it will be available throughout the rest of your home network. So if somebody else also wants to access your same music files, for example, then they should be able to do that through a media extender. And so that's why you'll go into the Devices and Printers folder, and all of a sudden you'll see something like an Xbox show up, or somebody else's PC or laptop that you didn't even expect to see there. And provided you have home networking turned on, you could take advantage of those shares. And then in demonstrating this, I'm going to my Windows 8 computer down to Start, where I'll right-click on that and choose Control Panel. And from here, we go to Hardware and Sound, and then you can see where my mouse pointer is at View Devices and Printers. Takes us right to here. You can see that I've got a few things attached for my devices. I've got a monitor. I've got it's actually a Wi-Fi access point, which it's calling a WAN device here. Some of these things will expose some kind of an interface or a UI if you double-click on them. Some of them will not. For example, this probably will just give me a properties sheet. So just really nothing too exciting to go on there. Just pretty basic information. I don't think this gives me anything. So there's nothing associated with that. Certainly the capability exists for that to open up either an application that's associated with that device or a web page, something like that. In this case, it doesn't do anything. This is actually the same computer that we're looking at right now. It's itself, basically. If I double click on this, again, I can get some rudimentary information that it's a virtual machine, for example. If I go to the Hardware tab, I can see more information about the various hardware properties of this machine. And if I go into the properties here, I can click on Advanced Settings, I can enable DMA, look at driver details. Notice that I can't update or disable or uninstall any of that kind of stuff. What's going on with that? Well, if we go back over to the General tab, we would have to click Change Settings. And from that point, it's given me administrative permission to go back to the driver and then either update the driver or uninstall it. So some of those things will be exposed if you click the administrator or the user account control buttons that allow you to do that. Notice also that by right-clicking, I can expose certain things that would normally appear, I think most of this appears in Control Panel, that the user might, again, not know how to get to on their own. But by right-clicking it, it exposes a lot of the common settings that they might be interested in. They can eject the DVD drive if they want to. They can browse files if they want to. So kind of similar things that we would normally do through Control Panel, but it's just only a right-click away once you're in this location. There's also multimedia devices. I don't think I have anything here. Oh, notice it says that the status is offline for this one. So apparently, I haven't made that available. But what I could do here is if I had other devices or printers that I wanted to expose, I could. And this would add, for example, multimedia digital media servers like this one right here. Okay, this is actually part of my... I have one of those Wi-Fi access points that does everything. It's a media server, plus it does Wi-Fi, plus it's got a switch on it with 4 ports on it. Plus it's a cable modem router. So anyway, it's got all those things on there. And then I'm just going to go over here to my digital media server and click on Next. And it's going to go ahead and install that on my system. And voila, there it appears. Now, I don't actually have anything shared or available, no multimedia or anything like that. But if I did, those things would now be available to us, and I could play, for example, music from that machine over on this one. And then, of course, we have things such as our printers. This is just a professional photo printer that I have. These are the default items. But again, any printers that we have attached should also appear in this. Notice that it's offline right now, and that's okay because it's actually physically turned off. But what I could do with this is all the same common printing properties and administration that I would normally be able to do. So lots of different things that appear here in Devices and Printers folder. Another thing that we would be able to access would be the basic PC settings, which you can access from the charm bar over on the far right. This is going to be for very simple device management. You're not going to really do a lot with it, but again, might be useful for the basic home user. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. If I go over here to the far right, here notice that it exposes our little charm bar. I click on Settings, and then I go to Change PC Settings down here at the bottom. Then I go over here to Devices over on the far left. Once I've gone there, it'll give us a list of the basic devices that it detects. Again, a lot of these are really the same things that we saw in the Devices and Printers folder. It's just another way of looking at them. So again, I can click Add Device. It'll search for various devices. I can add whatever that thing is. And voila, it's now adding it in. Okay, so it makes it really just that simple for the user side of things. Likewise, if I decide I don't want one of these items, I can select it, and notice that I can, first of all, I can rename this if I want to, but I can also click the minus button over here on the far right and remove that device, and there it goes away. We also have something here called Device Stage. I don't have any devices that I can use to show this to you, but the basic idea here is to give you a platform where you can see kind of a photorealistic icon, I guess, of whatever that device is, and it will give you information about it. So, for example, if I had one of those Windows phones, or if I had one of the Surface tablets, I could attach those things, and it would show me a kind of a photorealistic picture and live status of that device, how much battery life it has available, whether or not it's synchronized yet, how much storage I have left. All of those types of things, like the phones or the tablets, those sorts of things should give me that sort of information. Also, it can do additional things so that if you need to get to the web page for that device, it'll link you to the web page, maybe give you manuals. You can maybe connect to the support communities and ask various kinds of questions from that device. So that's just another location where you can manage your devices. In this nugget, we talked about driver and device management. We first of all took a look at driver store packages. Remember, this is where you can pre-populate, besides the default drivers, any additional drivers that you want, and we have a special tool that we were able to use to do that. Very easy to use, very simple. Also, we took a look at Device Manager. This is really where we spend most of our time doing any kind of configuration and management of devices if you're a more advanced user or a help desk or IT professional, but you'll use alternative device management for most home users, for folks that really aren't quite as familiar with how to manage their devices and need a little simpler interface. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.